According to IATA's report on African aviation for 2020, flights in the East African Community region continue to be some of the most expensive globally. But could this change with the entry of private players into the sector? Now, Derek Nseko is the founder of Airspace Africa, and he joins us right about now for more on this. Always a pleasure to have you on, Derek. Derek, could this change?
Yeah, thank you for having me again, Arnold. Yeah, very interesting, actually, what's happening in the East African aviation industry. We have four very big airlines, and looks like they can only continue to grow. And they're all set on becoming major players in the region and beyond. So it's going to be very, very interesting following these airlines as they try and battle for the East African skies. Yeah, but as we all know, the aviation industry is very, very difficult. And what you've touched upon, very high prices in the industry. But if you bring in private players, it's a very, very interesting question. There's no doubt that private players have a role to play in the industry. And I believe any form of competition, private or otherwise, tends to bring prices down. Yeah. However, what we really need in the East African aviation industry, and to be honest, even Africa, is more private investment, not necessarily private players, but private investment is important, because what we're looking for is a private sector mindset, even within our very own national airlines. Our industry, especially right now, where we have very low traffic volumes, to be honest with you, we're not looking to fragment our industry even further, but there's an opportunity for private players with such big players in the market. And the mindset of our national airlines tends to be further and further away from the region and from local. It tends to be a little bit grander. So the private sector has an opportunity to provide a feed, and to partner with these big players to provide the necessary feed to fill some of these large aircrafts that are being purchased to launch intercontinental flights. Yeah, but as we know, the environment is not easy in East Africa and in Africa. Our policy tends to be more nationalist and even protectionist. So the barriers to entry are very, very high. And there's a lot of red tape for private players. So we still have a huge role to play in order to stimulate our market to grow even further. So we need to take away some of these barriers for private players to come in. Yeah, but we tend to try and protect our national airlines' position in the market. That is a major problem.
And Derek, you mentioned two strong points there regarding barrier to entry, one being protectionism. The other, and I just want to give you a few stats here from this IATA report, right? Air passenger traffic in Africa fell by 65.7%. Global air transport traffic fell by 60.2%. That means Africa's fell by further 5% more, right? African airlines carried only 34.7 million passengers in 2020, and total losses were about 126 billion US dollars. As a private player, these are known numbers that are going to entice you to get into this sector. So what gives?
Yeah, there's no doubt. The numbers are not encouraging, but before the COVID hit the African aviation industry, this was really the last frontier of aviation. African aviation was projected to grow by 5.5% year on year for the next few years. So the outlook was actually very bright for the African aviation industry, which is still a very, very small part of the global air transport market. What is really a fact is that Africa has a lot of potential to grow, because this is a continent of over 1 billion people, and alternative transport infrastructure is extremely poor, which leaves air transport as a very critical sector. on the African continent. We know the African Continental Free Trade Area has just been operationalized at the beginning of this year. So those are also indicators that air transport still has a very, very huge role to play. And you mentioned the numbers as well. We're looking at the growth as well of the cargo sector, not just in Africa, but in the world. So air transport is still critical. It still has a huge role to play. And the potential is very huge for any kind of player, both private and otherwise. But when it comes to the private sector, I think we need to do more to incentivize the private sector players to come into play because there's a lot of barriers at the moment.
Derek, another interesting stat. The Cabinet Secretary in charge of transport in Kenya came out yesterday and filed that motion to the East African Community Secretariat regarding a reduction of fees. But an interesting take regarding the air ticket prices in the region, they say 43% of those air ticketing prices are down to regulatory charges, things like landing, parking rates, taxes, and accounting 43%. So you have a 1-hour flight from Nairobi to Dar es Salaam costing $400 on average. Now that is really out of pocket for the layman.
Yes, you've touched on something very important and one of the major issues. And one of the reasons why we continue to have a very small air transport sector, why there's so many Africans who cannot afford air transport, is still very much a luxury on this continent. But the answer to your question, Arnold, is deregulation. We need to deregulate the air transport sector in Africa. That is the only way that we are going to unlock its potential. The single African air transport market touches on high taxes and levies. It touches on all the critical areas that are hampering the growth of African aviation. And it's up to the people in power and authority and the political environment on the African aviation landscape to come on board and to recognize that air transport and that airlines, the sector is not just a cash cow, it's critical to our economies and to the growth of the entire continent. So we need to sign up to the open skies policy in Africa. It's the only way.